Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Minimize Regret. In this episode, I want to talk about positive versus negative, and I don't just mean that in the type of comments that a person makes to define that person as positive or negative. I want to think about it in the context of behavior and essentially how you direct and frame your own behavior. So, someone who is very negative in terms of trying to direct their behavior would essentially try to shy away from certain things because they believe they're bad, which you would think would end up leading them towards behaviors that are good. Whereas someone who is more positive will tend to be inclined to things that give them positive feedback, and then they will tend to do those things more often. So it's just another way of thinking about feedback, but also like the feedback that you're giving yourself, which is really going to drive your own behaviors. And that's why I think it's so powerful because, in my opinion, being stuck as a negative person and framing your own actions as negative and saying you should doing things is just far less powerful than the thing I've mentioned many times before on this channel, but chasing big goals and getting positive feedback from that and it kind of feeding into itself. So I used to be a very negative person. And what I mean by that is I had a lot of shame around my behaviors. I would play video games and I was like, oh, I shouldn't be playing video games. I should have something better to do with my life. And then I would do something else like watch porn and like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like I should go out and find a woman to love, blah 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 blah. And while that may be true, quite honestly, being stuck in that loop of negativity and shame, while it may have occasionally changed my behavior, for the most part, it just left me feeling bad about myself. And now I realize that's why goals and who you want to be essentially shape your future self. And as you take actions, you create positive feedback that feeds into this feedback loop where you actually change and become better. And so, like, this concept is really everything to me. Like, you have to be growing, you have to be getting better and improving and creating these positive cycles. Otherwise, you may just end up doing nothing with your life or spend or waste what precious time we have. And that is the biggest pathway towards having a regretful life. And is honestly probably the biggest regret of my life is all the time that I've spent not building something and being sucked into what I call non-realities, which would be like TV, video games, stuff that doesn't necessarily impact the real world. Not to say that you can't frame those things in such a way that they do impact the world, but for me, like my experiences in those realms did not have any real positive impact on my interactions outside of those things. So this is sort of a call to not shame yourself and not get down on yourself for doing something that you deem as bad or not worthy of your time. Instead, come up with something important enough to you that you focus your energy towards it and you start working towards it and you start getting positive feedback that kind of drives that behavior pattern. Um, and honestly, like this sounds obvious and it seems simple, but it's so easy to get stuck in the negative. And I was stuck in the negative for who knows, like maybe a decade or more, and it took me forever to start building and getting out of it, and instead of just feeling bad about myself. So I think this is a really powerful concept and is also a very simple concept. So go out there and start building.